Okay, so I've taken those slots that I mentioned and fastened these rails in here. You can see the other ones in there. And so this is basically together. And this block right here will have pieces of plastic on the side. And this will slide forward and back like that. So next up, I have to remember what I need to do next. Well, I have to do something. So next what I'm doing is I'm fitting this nut onto the end of the table. So I cut this groove in here, and I cut another groove in the table, and then I put this piece of cherry in here. It's only sticking out a little more than 1/4 of an inch, and I think that should be enough. And so that just goes on here as a way to keep it from, keep it lined up. And so I've also marked. It's kind of hard to see. There's a mark. There's a little X mark right there. There's a couple X marks for me to drill the big screws that are going to go in here. They're massive. I'll get one for you. They're this long. So these are going to go in 2 on the end, 2 here, and then 2 here on the rail. So that is what I've been up to. Next, I will be drilling the holes for these and putting this nut on the end of our bench. And then, I won't be gluing the pieces together yet, probably for quite a while, but I will clamp them together to make sure that everything fits and works well. Okay, so now we have the tabletop clamped up. Here's the little block that would slide back and forth. And here is our nut that goes on the end. There are the holes on the outside. I drilled these larger so that the wood can expand and contract in the table. So I've lined these up in there, and then I made marks. You can't really see them. I can't really see them either. I'll need to track them down. But I did make marks with screws as to where I need to drill into the tabletop. So I will be doing that, and then mounting this nut on. One of the screws that's going in the end of the bench is a little bit too long, so I need to cut off about 1 inch of it. So this should make a bunch of sparks. It's not as much as I thought. I guess stainless steel doesn't make as many sparks as other steels. Alright, then let's get you set up here so you can see me putting these in. I already have 2 bolts in to hold this in place. Now I just have to put the rest in. This bottom one needed to be shorter because the rails that you may remember inside here, if this were its full length, it would hit one of those bolts. And we don't want that. Okay, I forgot a washer, but I'm going to take it off shortly again anyway, so that's not a big deal. But you can see all the lag bolts are on, and there's where the screw is going to move back and forth on these, and the block will move on these tracks here. In fact, here's the screw. So let's put it in. Okay, so this is the screw partially in, and so this block will slide back and forward. It'll be attached to this, and then this moving back and forward will be our vise. Okay, so we finally glued up the rail, the centerpiece, and the rest of the tabletop. And here is the screw mechanism back here with the nut on, and now we just need to wait for that to dry and plane it flat. So now I'm in the process of making the sliding dog block. The block is here, and I have to carve these little grooves in here so that I can cut sections of this ultra high density molecular plastic or something, I forget exactly what it's called, to go in there to act as rails. So I'm using my router plane for that again, and I'm almost done with this side. Okay, so that side should be done, assuming that this fits in there. It's a little tight over here. Now, yeah, I would say that that side's good. Cool. So now I need to do the other side, and I'll show you how I get that started here. So I have two lines that are pretty hard to see, but I used a knife to make them. So then I'm going to take my chisel, and I'm going to come just on the insides of those lines to make what's called a knife wall. And that gives me a little itty bitty channel for the saw to run in. Because what I didn't say was that when I chiseled this out and routed this out, first I used a saw on the sides so that they would give me nice crisp sides. So there's a little groove there now. So now I'll come on this side and do the same thing. Kind of it feels a little tedious to do it, but you can oftentimes just do that. But it pays off by not having to follow a graphite line. And I have marked on here, again hard for you to see, but I can see it, how far down to go. And so I let this saw ride in the bottom of that groove. And I just go back and forth, checking every once in a while. I need to get this little anchor down this vise here. That's better. I'm using hold fast to keep the vise down. You can see these long, thin shavings that this saw is producing when you might expect it to be sawdust, and that's because we're cutting with the grain. So it's not so much as cutting as peeling the wood out. If you ever run a chainsaw and have the chance to use that to rip a log, you will have the same sort of situation. A little bit more. So I'm down on this side, and on this side I'm down. Okay, so then I will take a chisel and get the majority of it out. Oops. I'm raising this right here. It's not really a problem. It's always good to take a light pass on your chisel, because if I went the full thickness down here, then I would have ripped out way too much wood on this. By the time that chip got to the other side. I'm trying to be conscious not to peel more pieces off the side. This cut is just ever so narrower than the other side. And this is a 3/4 inch chisel. And I'm making cuts that are 3/4 of an inch wide, so it would make sense that it's close. I'm turning it around just to help me with the grain. I'm going to back up my router here a little bit. A little bit more. I only started using one of these recently. This is not mine. I'm borrowing this, and it is a pleasure to use. I think the key is to take a bunch of light passes with this, as opposed to heavy passes. It takes you longer to get where you're going, but it leaves a very smooth surface. Almost there. Just going to check the depth with a combination square, a little bit more. Now this one was a little tighter than the other side, so I have my doubts about the plastic fitting in there as much as I want it to. But we'll just have to keep our fingers crossed. Well, it fits, and it doesn't want to come out. That's a good sign, I guess. Okay, great. Okay, so now this block has the rails on the side and a hole in the back for the nut, and for that black piece on the end of the nut, and then these two holes right here. So this goes in See these notches right here? It goes in though right there, and then the nut here goes on the end right there. Sorry, I'm trying to do this with just one hand. And so then these will be bolted into there. So I'll show you when I'm... So here is the Wagon vise installed. So you can see as I screw it in, this space closes up. I could put something in there, but the real beauty of this vise is when you have something sticking up here and then you have something sticking up further along the table, and so you can clamp very long things. I have to still put make a handle for this. I don't anticipate that to take that long, but at this point I think I might, once the glue's dried, I might flatten this and start work on the bottom legs.